I'm in mechanical engineering. I teach design to mech students, and I'm also associate director of a human-robot interaction lab. So I do a lot of designing for people and with people. I had the pleasure of organizing this lecture series this afternoon, and I brought two of my friends and colleagues to talk to you and discuss with you a couple of initiatives here at UBC that relate to design. So we'll have two speakers. The first speaker is Professor Moura Quayle, who is in the Sauer School of Business. She's professor there and runs the D Studio. Professor Quayle also has a long and storied history, decades-long history here at UBC, as well as in Vancouver. So she is from the Land and Food System. She's been dean there. And she's also participated in the Vancouver Urban Landscape Task Force, which resulted in the Greenways program. So design has obviously been both from the economic as well as from the civic side, a very important component of her work over her professional career. So I'll introduce Tony Hodgson in about 20 minutes. But in the meantime, I'd like to invite Moura to come up and talk to us about processes, principles, and practices of strategic design. Okay, Moura.
Okay, perfect. Can you hear me? Yep. Yes, perfect. Okay, we're good. We're all good. Mike, could you give me maybe the 15-minute sign? That would help me because I definitely don't want to erode into Tony's time. So, well, it's a great pleasure to be here today. This is my second time in the Ike Barber Learning Center today. The first time being the announcement of the new president of UBC, Arvind Gupta, which is pretty exciting news for I think all of us. And yeah, so it's one of those historic days. What I decided to do today is to really focus on the D Studio, but really on the practice aspect. The studio is actually a little place, and with an emphasis on the little. When the former dean of the Sauer Business School, Dan Mazika, he came to me one day because I'd been talking to him about the fact that you can't do design in business unless you have a place to do it in, which is generally called a studio. So he came and said, I found your studio, Moura. So I followed him into this small windowless room, which was the reason why it was available, right? Because it's not on the classroom roster. So I took a deep breath and I said, thank you, Dan. This is fabulous. I'm a designer. I can turn this into a place that's going to work. So we have. So the studio is a place, it's also a pedagogy, and it's where Angel Beausoleil, who's here, and my colleague, and a current PhD student at UBC, we practice strategic design in the studio from an education perspective, which is what I'll talk about today, and also from a research perspective. So strategic design, many of you who are interested in design will have picked up that design thinking over the last 5 or more years has kind of come into vogue, if you will. I'm not crazy about the term. I think it focuses too much on thinking and not enough on action. But that being said, I prefer strategic design, and especially in a business sense, I think it's important to think about the high-level, long-term aspects, the idea of design, and using the designer's toolkit to really solve those kind of systemic and challenging problems which we all face, and in particular, in my role at Sauder, the business community faces. And it's often the question of asking ourselves, what's the problem or opportunity that we're facing? And then what are the processes that we might want to use to find a solution? Now, I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to design process, but I do find with students, and even with myself, it's helpful to have one that I can actually remember. So I'm sort of tending towards the one syllable, small words. So I'm kind of into ask, which of course is the obvious research phase, asking questions, making observations, deriving insights, framing opportunities. And then the try phase, which is very much about prototyping and saying, okay, what are these criteria? What can we do? How can we generate ideas? How can we share our ideas and our prototypes and get feedback from everybody that we need to get feedback from? And how can we engage everybody who should be at the table in solving this particular problem? Reflect is really essential part of the process of ask, try, do. You're always moving around and it's quite iterative. And then do is obviously, okay, it isn't just about thinking about something, it's actually about making, doing, making something happen, whether it's a policy, a process, a thing. So that's the general drift of the process that we use. I think that strategic design, for me, and the way I try to explain it to the undergrads, is very much, when you take a Bachelor of Commerce student, they are so, anybody here have a BCom background? Oh, okay. In fact, I should have asked, are you mainly computer science folks? Computer science, okay. How about humanities? Social scientists? Yes, there we go. Okay, good, thanks. So anyway, I will tell you a little bit about the wonderful people who are BComs. And they, Angela and I in the D Studio, we teach a course that's called Design Strategies for Business Innovation. And they are, by the third and fourth year, extremely well schooled in their analytical skills. So I kind of call that my critical voice. And you know, as human beings, most of us have pretty darn strong and well-developed critical voices, which tend to shut down ideas sometimes, but are very useful skills. What we try to do in the studio is allow our creative voice to speak when it should. And so the trick is actually knowing when to beckon the critical voice and when to silence it, and when to beckon the creative voice and when to silence it. So really the practice of strategic design is around thinking in, let's say, a balanced way, and also having a rigorous process. As a landscape architect and urban designer, I have to say I get irritated if there's a sense that design is this fluffy, not very easy to pin down, and certainly not rigorous process. I think it's an extremely rigorous process, and it has certainly an ambiguity about it that's built in and is essential. And that's one of the things that is so fascinating about teaching in a studio. So this is the Little D Studio. So basically we designed it with very thick walls so that you can actually open up these pods and students can cluster, and a lot of collaborative teamwork. It's very flexible, you can close them up, you can open them. So this is where the studio activities occur. And COM 388, I must say, one of my proudest contributions to UBC when I was on Senate was to actually get pilot courses happening. The fact that we didn't have to kind of go through 2 years of getting a course. So COM 388 was a pilot course for a couple of years, and now it's on our books. So it's really about all these things, introducing the strategies, fostering some creativity and risk-taking, building a problem-solving capacity, and really important for me is it's about leadership. Like, why did I come to the business school? And I was in government for 4 years, and I was there at a time when the climate action activities were all really key. And I started thinking, who is going to make the changes to our society and our business activities fast enough? You know, it's going to be those darn business students. I better get in there and give them some of the skills that I think they need to be leaders in a low carbon economy, because it's a different context. So the first thing that we do in the studio, the very first day, and I know the students are expecting to have me drone on about the syllabus and then send them home. Well, with the studio, you can't do that. I've got 3 hours times 13. I'm gonna waste time droning on about the syllabus. So we do generally a little exercise we call business in a backpack. And business in a backpack basically says, Mike, you and I are partners, and we dump out our backpacks or purses or whatever, and we have about 90 minutes to build a business together, which comes from us interviewing each other. So it gets at one of the most important skills that we want to build in the studio, which is asking questions. So Mike, what's your background? Where are you from? Where are your passions? What's this? So 90 minutes to build a business and 90 seconds to pitch it to all of us. You wouldn't believe the ideas that come out of that crazy little experience. It also scares people away. So I have had people kind of not go running out of the room, but you can just see that they're like, oh, I don't know whether I can actually take this. There's too much ambiguity happening. We also do a lot of warm-ups, because I know that these students are coming from accounting classes and finance classes, where their minds are in a whole other space. They might even be coming from lunch. So we always do a kind of a, okay, let's do improv, let's draw, let's do the visual telephone. There's a million different warm-ups that actually get us into the spirit of the studio. Over the past 5 years, I've realized that the BCom is a highly theoretical degree. And I'm kind of thinking, wait a minute, these students need to engage with businesses. So our policy is that we always have a real client. And for a number of years, I worked with Climate Smart Business, and Climate Smart is a not-for-profit who actually helps small and medium-sized businesses move into developing metrics for their greenhouse gas emissions, looking at their supply chain. And so the students over the last couple of years have worked with Climate Smart. Last fall, changed the mode up a little bit. Had 2 studios, 2 projects, one with the Vancouver Sun and the Vancouver Province on a digital citizen historian project looking at business models. The second one was with Lululemon. So the other model that I'm really intrigued with is to co-teach with a business person. So I co-taught with Nancy Richardson. She's the Vice President of Global and Digital Branding at Lululemon. So you can imagine, any of you who follow Lululemon in the fall, you could imagine what she would come into the studio and basically say, guess what happened to us this morning? Chip Wilson did an interview that just rippled through social media. And that's her gig, right? It's like, so the students had this amazing opportunity to have Nancy say, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? And so lots of discussion. So Nancy brought 4 projects into the studio. Some of them were very much product type projects, which I'm not so inclined to bring into the studio, because we have a wonderful partnership with our engineering colleagues called New Venture Design, which tends to be more product related. So we had a sustainable packaging. The men's line. How many of you men have ever gone into a Lululemon store? Well done. This is good. Anyway, their revenue from the men's line is only 13%, and they want to change that. And I'm telling you, that team, when they presented their ideas, the people from Lulu were all like, oh my God, great ideas. Meta Movement is a community initiative where members from the community can get grants from Lululemon. There was also a vision and goals group. Lululemon would like to be a leadership company, not just a clothing company. So we also, Nancy brought her Lululemon's approach to a design process called Cycles of Success, overlaid it and integrated it with Ask, Try, Do. So the students actually got a different perspective from Nancy. We always tend to have them do a design brief or a project brief, so they actually have to think about what can I accomplish in my 13 weeks. And so they basically co-create with their client their process, which of course never quite works out the way they imagine, but that's a lesson in itself. We also try to get them to do individual SWOTs and team SWOTs. So here's the team. We actually don't really know each other. It's really important for us to understand, oh, Tony brings this amazing skill. And they also talk about what they want to work on. Okay, I don't usually lead, so could I try leading for a while? So that kind of a discussion is quite important. As is iPeer. Doing iPeer, we do a lot of iPeer at Sauder. Do you guys know what iPeer is? So it's an online peer evaluation, an anonymous system, so you can actually give input to your team members without them knowing exactly who's giving the input. Often there's no debrief, they just do it. And so we debrief it, and it's feedback is good. We use a lot of prototyping, and one of the vehicles that we use is the business model Canvas, which basically makes visual a lot of the principles and theories that the business students are used to working with. So it's really important that the studio, one of the studio outcomes is that the students start to feel more comfortable in being visual. And that they actually get to some concrete recommendations and generally numbers. I don't say numbers are not important, they're critically important. So there's a cycle through that whole process. So if you want to find out more about the D-Studio, actually it's pretty easy, you can just Google D-Studio and miracle of miracles, it comes up. The MBA program also we interact with that program. I'm very interested, we have tools and techniques. So everything from, we love doing assumption junction. I direct you to that. If you're ever doing a project and you're thinking, I'm a little stuck here, assumption junction will unpack it and blast it apart. So the tools and techniques are all on the website. It's really about learning by doing. And we collaborate with something called the Bee Clinic at Sauder. People come saying, oh, I'm an not-for-profit, I need a marketing plan. So we try to bring things together. But my final question is there an opportunity for a cross-university studio to tackle systemic problems and provide learning by doing experience? Because to tell you the truth, I think our business students need to interact with a broader range of folks. And so I understand being focused on Sauder for the last 5 years, but I'm really ready to even go off the campus to MD Ambridge. So that's me. Thank you.
Well, we switch over